Welcome back to the third and the final lecture on Introduction to Poetry. We stopped last time on exercises. Let's start with exercise one, working with rhyme. Let's try specific exercise. Write a short poem, 8 to 12 lines using specific rhyme scheme. Try AABB, meaning lines rhyme in couplets, or ABAB, meaning lines alternate rhyme, or ABCB, where only the second and the fourth lines rhyme. The exercise helps you feel how rhyme creates structure and emphasis or emphasizes certain words. Notice how searching for rhymes pushes you toward words you wouldn't normally choose. This constraint can lead to surprising discoveries. You might intend to use one word, but needing a rhyme leads you to a better, a more interesting word. Constraint breeds your creativity. For example, if you are writing about night and need a rhyme for noon or for moon, you might discover tune, June, or canoon, or cocoon, each suggesting different possible directions for your poem. Exercise 2, exploring matter. Here is another exercise. Choose a simple meter. Iambic is easiest, the unstressed stressed pattern, and write several lines following that pattern. Try iambic pentameter 5 feet per line. The cat sat on the mat beneath the tree. That's 10 syllables, alternating unstressed, stressed, working within metrical constraints challenges you to find natural soundings in language and maintains the rhythm. Excellent practice in craft control. You're learning to hear the rhythms of languages and shape them purposefully. This exercise teaches you that form and content interact. Sometimes the matter suggests words or ideas you wouldn't have discovered without the constraints. Exercise 3, imagery and sensory detail. The third describes a memory, place, or emotion using imagery that appeals to at least three different senses. Do not name the emotion directly. Do not write I felt sad or I was happy. Show through concrete sensory details. Let the imagery evoke emotions directly. For example, instead of I felt alone, try empty chairs. Ranged the client dinner table, cold coffee at or sat untouched. The clocks tickle echoed. This shows loneliness through specific sensory details, visual imagery of empty chairs, tactile sense of cold, auditory imagery of silence and tickling. Readers feel the emotion more powerfully than if you simply stated this is principles show, do not feel or do not tell the action. Now let's move to encouraging personal voice while learning techniques is important. The ultimate goal is discovering your unique voice, your distinctive way of seeing the world and using language. Your voice emerges from your specific experiences, interests, observations, and the perspectives. Write about what genuinely interests or moves you, not what you think should be poetic. There is no hierarchy of poetic subjects. A poem about dishwashing can be as powerful as a poem about death if it's honest and well crafted. The most powerful poems come from authentic emotions and observation, not from trying to sound poetic. Do not judge your first drafts harshly. Initial Writing is about exploring and discovery. Perfection comes through revision. Write freely without self-censorship in first drafts, then revise critically. Good poetry usually requires multiple drafts. Be willing to cut lines you love if they do not serve the poem. This is often called killing your darlings, removing words or lines that might be beautiful in isolation but do not fit the poem's overall purpose. Now, let's go to finding inspiration. Where does inspiration come from? Here are practical sources. Keep journal of observation phrases and images you encounter daily. The usual or unusual cloud formation and overhead of their conversation fragment, the way light hits a building, jot these down. They become raw material for poems. Read widely, other poems inspire new poems. Reading shows your what's possible, what's being done, what you might try, what right from photographs or artwork. Um, ekphrastic poetry responds to visual art, translating one medium into another. Use writing prompts or constraints. Write a poem using only questions or write about a color without naming it. Capture overhead conversations. Read a special has rhythm and strangeness that invented dialogue often like explore small ordinary moments deeply. You do not need exotic experiences to write powerful poems. The trick is seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary. Now let's go for revision, where good poems become great. Professional poets revise extensively. Some work on single poems for months or years. Revision isn't just fixing errors like typos or grammatical mistakes. It's remaining and reimagining and refining, reconceiving the poem after drafting. Step away from a day or more. This essence lets you return with fresh eyes, seeing what you actually wrote rather than what you meant to write. Read your draft aloud. This reveals awkward rhythms, unclear meanings, lines that do not quite work. Ask yourself um, critical questions. Does every word matter, or are some just taking up space? Are images specific and vivid, or vague and abstract? Is the line arrangement purposeful, or could you break lines differently for better effects? Um, Will the poem surprising? Where it where is it predictable? Can anything be cut? Often the best revision is deletion, removing everything unnecessary until only essential elements remain. Now let's go to get feedback carefully. Share drafts with trusted readers, but remember you're in a charge. You're seeking feedback, not permission or validation. Take suggestions that resonate with your vision, politely ignore those that do not explain what you're trying to achieve to. So feedback can address whether you're succeeding at your goals rather than trying to make the poem into something different. Good feedback focuses on craft is this working rather than just the praise or criticism. Ask specific questions. Does this ending feel too abrupt? Is the metaphor and stanza too clear? Specific questions get useful feedback. Experiment fearlessly. Try radical revisions, rewrite in a different form. Take your free verse poem and try it as a sonnet. change the speaker, write in a different voice or persona, revise the order, start with your ending, cut the first stanza, often first stanza are just warm up and poems actually start at stanza two. You can always return to earlier drafts if experiment experiments do not work. Save multiple versions. Sometimes radical experiments fail but reveal something. You can use the willingness to experiment is crucial for growth. Now, let's go to know when to stop. Poems can be revised endlessly, and endless revision can actually harm a poem, making it overall polished and lifeless. At some point, poems are done. Trust your instincts about when a poem has reached its best version. If you're making changes but not actually improving the poem anymore, just making it different is probably done. Some imperfection is acceptable. No poem is perfect. Done is better than perfect. You can always write another poem. You do not need to pack everything into one poem. Now let's go to persistence and practice. Remember, every poet, even celebrated masters, writes bad poems and has drafts that do not work. Langston Hughes write failed poems. Even Shakespeare probably had drafts he crumbled up. What distinguishes good poets isn't in it genius, but persistence, willingness to revise, openness to learning, and the courage to keep creating despite imperfection. Your voice develops through practice. Write regularly, even if just brief exercises. Read voraciously contemporary poetry, classic poetry, poetry from different cultures. Trust the process. Even poem you write builds skills, even the failed ones. Now let's go to common challenges. Introduction. Every student encounters challenges when studying poetry. Understanding these common obstacles and learning strategies to overcome them builds confidence and competence. Remember, struggle is a part of the learning process, not a sign of failure. Even experienced readers find some poems initially confusing or resistant to interpretation. I still encounter poems that perplex me. This selection addresses the most frequent difficulty students face and produces concrete approaches for working through them successfully. You're not alone to find poetry challenging, everyone does. Now let's go to challenges. Unfamiliar vocabulary. First challenge, unfamiliar vocabulary. And the archaic language. The problem is that older poems often use words we do not encounter in modern English, or use familiar words in unfamiliar ways. Milton, Shakespeare, even Dickinson use language differently than we do. Unusual syntax or word order can make sentences difficult to parse. The woods lovely dark and deep are instead of the woods are lovely dark and deep. These vocabulary barriers prevents comprehension. Solutions keep a good dictation. Handy online resources like the Oxford English Dictionary are invaluable, showing historical meanings of words. Do not skip over unknown words, look them up, try rearranging inverted syntax into normal world order. Context usually helps. Now we have to say that context usually helps clarify meaning, even if you do not know every word surrounding words provide clues. With practice, you develop intuitions for archaic language patterns. You will start recognizing that the means you, that hath means has, uh, that inverted syntax was conventional in early periods. Do not let unfamiliar language stop you. Approach it systematically, and you'll find it becomes less intimidating. Now let's go for the second challenge, complex and ambiguous meaning. Second challenge, complex or ambiguous meaning. The problem is that unlike textbooks or institutions that aim for clarity, turn left at the shop sign means exactly that. Poems often embrace ambiguity, multiple meanings, and complexity. A line might mean two or three things simultaneously. Students worry they're missing the one correct interpretation or feel frustrated by uncertainty. They want the answer key solutions, accept that good poems often support multiple valid interpretations. Your job isn't to find the single right answer. There often isn't one, but building a thoughtful interpretation supported by textual evidence. Start with what you can understand, the literal events, clear images, observe patterns, then work outward to explore implications and deeper meanings. Discuss with others different perspectives, illuminate aspects you missed. A classmate might notice something you didn't remember. That ambiguity isn't a bug in poetry, it's a feature. Poems are deliberately open ended to allow for rich, varied responses. Now let's go to challenge three, over interpretation. Third challenge, over interpretation and unsupposed readings. The problem is that in trying to find the deep meaning, students sometimes projects interpretations onto poems without uh, contextual support. They see symbols anywhere. The blue curtains symbols or symbolize depression or attribute intentions the text doesn't support. This leads to far-fetched readings that do not hold up under scrutiny. Solutions ground every interpretive claim in textual evidence. Ask yourself constantly what specific words, images, or structural choices support this reading. If you can point to create evidence in the poem itself, reconsider your interpretation, distinguish between what is the poem and what you're bringing to it from personal experience. Both matter. Reader response is valid, but be clear about which is which. Say, this image reminds me of X from my life, rather than this image definitely means X. Balance creativity with accountability to the text. Wild interpretations are fine if they are supported, unsupported claims are not. Now let's go to the next challenge, lack of confidence. Fourth challenge, lack of confidence and the fear of being wrong. The problem is that many students feel intimidated by poetry, believing they lack some special insight of talent needed to understand it. They think literary critics and the professors have access to secret knowledge. This fear prevents them from engaging genuinely with poems or sharing their responses. They stay silent in discussions, terrified or saying something stupid solutions. Remember that close reading skills are learned, not innate or not innate. No one is born knowing how to analyze poetry. Everyone starts as a beginner. Poetry isn't a secret code requiring a special key. It's communication that rewards careful attention. Start by trusting your initial responses. What do you notice? What questions arise? What feels important? Your genuine observation are available. Build interpretations from these honest observations rather than trying to guess what the right answer is. Join discussions even when uncertain questions and tentative ideas contribute to collective understanding. Often, someone's I am confusing by this line, opening a productive discussion. Confidence grows through practice and risk taking. Every time you share on interpretive or interpretation, even if it's challenged or revised, you're confidence. Building confidence through practice. The single best way to overcome poetry and anxiety is regular practice. Read poems frequently, not just assigned texts, but poems you choose because they interest you. Find poets whose work speaks to you and read widely in their work. Join or form a poetry reading group where you can discuss interpretations without grades at stake. This low pressure environment lets you explore ideas freely. Write your own poems to understand the creative process from inside. You'll gain tremendous respect for all the crafts and insight into how poems are made. Keep a poetry journey where you respond informally to poem you read, what strikes you, what confuses you, what you'd like to understand better. This low stakes writing builds analytical skills without performance pressure. Over time, you'll notice your observations becoming more sophisticated and your confidence growing. You'll start to seeing things in points automatically that you once missed. Now let's go to when to ask for help. Um, know when to seek assistance. If you have applied your analysis strategies systematically and still feel stuck, this is time to consult your instructor. Visit a writer center or a writing center or discuss with classmates. Asking for help isn't weakness, it's about strategy. Um, but come prepared, explain what you have understood and where significantly you're struggling. Do not just say, I don't get this poem. Say, understand that the speaker is describing a storm, but I'm confusing about why the speaker calls it a blessing. Can you help me think about that? This focused request for assistance unusually gets you past obstacles quickly. Remember, every reader, no matter how experienced, encounters poems that perplex them initially. The difference is that experienced reader have strategies for working through confusing and confidence that understandingly will come with effort. You're building those same capacities through persistent engagement with poverty or with poetry. Now let's move to interactive activities introduction. Learning poetry is inherently social and interactive. While individual reading and analysis are important, discussing poems with others opens new perspectives, challenges assumptions and deepens understanding. You realize your interpretation isn't the only one, and exposure to different readings enriches your own. This section often activates and activities and discussions promise designed to make poetry study more engaging, collaborative, and creative. These exercises work in classrooms, study groups, or independent exploration, transforming poetry from solitary study into shared discovery. Poetry comes alive in conversation. Close reading circles. First activity, close reading circles. In small groups of 3 to 5 people, select a poem and read it aloud multiple times with different people reading. Discuss immediate reactions first. What strikes you? What confuses you? What words or images stand out? Do not analyze yet. Just share initial responses, then analyze systematically, identify literary devices, discuss form and structure, debate possible interpretations, have catch group members defend a difficult reading, then work toward consensus or acknowledge a productive disagreement. Sometimes the best outcome is understanding why the poem supports multiple readings. Report the findings to the larger class. This activity shows how multiple perspectives enrich understanding and that disagreement can be productive, not problematic. Now let's move to comparative analysis. Second activity, comparative analysis. Choose 2 poems on similar themes. 2 love poems, 2 natural poems, 2 political poems, and compare these approaches. What techniques does each use? How do their tunes differ? What different perspectives do they offer on the theme? For example, compare Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to A Summer's Day with Edna St. Vincent Millay? What lips in my lips have kissed? Both about love, but with vastly different approaches. Create Venn diagrams or charts showing similarities and differences. This activity sharpens analytical skills by highlighting choices poets make. When you see 2 different approaches to the same theme, you realize each choice is deliberate. Now let's go to mystery poet exercise. Third activity, mystery poet exercise, present poems without author, names, or dates. Have groups analyze and guess when the poem was written, whether by a male or female poet, and what the poet's concerns might be based solely on the text. What clues does the language, subject matter, or form provide? Then reveal the poet and the context. Discuss what clues led to correct or incorrect guesses, where use assumptions accurate. What surprised you? This exercise demonstrates how historical and cultural context shapes poetry while revealing assumptions readers bring to text. You might assume certain subjects or styles belong to specific genders or uh, eras, and this activity challenges those assumptions. Now let's go to pair review of original poems. Fourth activity, workshop your creative writing by sharing drafts with peers, establish grounds rules. First, be supportive and constructive. Always note strengths before suggesting improvements. Focus on craft rather than content. Discuss whether the metaphor works, not whether you like the poem subject. Identify both strengths and the areas for development. Other specific suggestions: could you make this image more concrete rather than vague. I do not like this part as you give and receive feedback. You develop editorial skills that improve your own writing, seeing how others respond to your work shows where your intentions aren't yet clear on the page. You meant one thing, but readers understood something else. That gap reveals revision needs. Peer reviews also reveals new possibilities you hadn't considered sometimes, or someone might suggest an interpretation or direction you didn't see. Now let's go to uh, creative projects. Ekphrastic response. No. Now some creative projects inspired by poetry. First, ekphrastic response. Read a poem, then create visual art inspired by it. Drawing, painting, collage, photography, or digital art. How do you translate verbal imagery into visual form? What colors, shapes, or compositions capture the poem's mood? If the poem is dark and turbulent, what visual elements convey that? This exercise makes you think deeply about the poem's imagery and the emotional quality. You're interpreting through a different medium, which reveals new insights. Um, Creative project found poetry. Second, found poetry, cut up newspapers, magazines, or print existing texts, arrange the found words into new poems. This technique reveals how context it changes meaning. The same words mean something different when rearranged. It helps you see language as material to be shaped like clay for a sculpture. William Burrard and Beats. I use the cut-up techniques. Contemporary poets create sound poems from legal documents, instruction manuals, spam emails. It's playful but teaches serious lessons about language and meaning. Now let's move to poetry comics. Third, the poetry comics combine words and images by creating comic strips or graphic interpretations of poems. This multimedia approach explores how visual and verbal elements interact. How do images enhance, complicate, or change the word's meanings? This is especially interesting for abstract or surreal points where images can interpret ambiguity. You're creating a hybrid form that both literary and visual art. Now let's go to discussion from its occasion. Here are discussion prompts you can use with any poem. First, what's the occasion? What situation or prompt does this poem arise from? What prompts the speaker to speak now? In this way, poems often emerge from specific occasions, a death, a moment of insight, a particular place or time. Understanding the occasion helps you understand the poem's urgency or purpose. Why this poem now? Now let's move to discussion prompt surprise. Where does the poem surprise you? Identify moments of unexpected word choice, images, or turn in thought. What effects or what effect do these surprises create? Surprise often indicates uh, where meaning intensifies. If a poem seems to be about one thing, then suddenly shifts that turn is crucial. forests, the road not taken surprises us with its final stanzas shift to future tense and the ironic revelation. Now let's go to the what is withheld. Take the prompt, what does the poem refuses to tell us? What information is withheld or ambiguous? How does this ambiguity contributes to the poem's effect? Sometimes what is not said as is as important as what is. Poems that leave questions unanswered invite reader participation. We complete the poem through interpretation. Emily Dickinson really provides complete context. She drops us into the middle of situations, forcing us to piece together meaning. Now let's go to discussion. Prompt, what if? Fourth prompt, how would the poem change if? Imagine specific alternations, all alterations, different word choices, altered line breaks, changed form, or alternative endings. How would these changes affect meaning? This thought experiment reveals how every choice matters. For example, what if process the road not taken ended after the third stanza? Without the future projection, it would be a completely different poem. This exercise develops editorial awareness. Now let's move to the final one, fifth prompt. What question? What question is this poem asking rather than asking what answer or message the poem offers? Consider what questions is explored. Poetry often investigates rather than concludes. It poses questions, explores tensions, examines contradictions without necessarily resolving them. Asking what question drives this poem often reveals more than asking what does it mean. This reframes poetry as inquiry rather than statement. Now let's go to engagement and community. These activities transform passive reading into active engagement. They build a community around poetry, showing you're not alone in finding poems challenging. They reveal how multiple perspectives enrich understanding. Hearing five different interpretations make you realize the poem enriches. Poetry is most alive when shared, discussed, and responded to creatively. These exercises help you develop your critical voice while appreciating orders, insights, and interpretations. Poetry has always been communal, from ancient oral traditions to medieval courts to contemporary poetry slams. Participating in this traditions connects you to centuries of shared reading. Uh, Summary, the power and pleasure of poetry. As we reach the conclusion of this introduction, let's reflect on what makes poetry such an enduring and powerful form of human expression. Throughout this presentation, you've encountered poetry unique qualities, its compression of language, its attestation or its attention to sound and rhythm, its embrace of ambiguity and multiple meanings, and its capacity to capture human experience in ways that transcend ordinary communication. You've learned analytical strategies, explored versions, forms, and devices, and begin developing your own poetic voice. Now it's time to synthesize these elements and consider poetry's larger significance. Now let's move to recapping poetry's unique qualities. Let's recap what makes poetry special. First, language as music. Poetry transforms words into music through rhythm, rhyme, and sound devices. Creating aesthetic pleasure beyond meaning. Second, multiple meanings. Poetry's embrace of ambiguity honors complexity, allowing different readers to find different truths in the same text. Third, compression and intensity. Poetry says more with less, packing complex emotions and ideas into compact forms where every word carries weight. Fourth, fresh perception through metaphor, imagery, and innovative language. Poetry makes us see the familiar words with renewed wonder and insight. Fifth, emotional truth. Poetry captures the texture of human feeling with precision that ordinary language struggles to achieve. Six, culture memory. Poetry preserves and transmits cultural values, historical experiences, and collective wisdom across a generation. Now let's go to your learning journey. You have progressed from basic definitions to sophisticated analysis, from passive readings to active creations. You've learned to identify rhyme schemes, meters, and stanzas, recognize metaphor, imagery, and symbolism, analyze how form shapes meaning, and express interpretations through writing. You've also begun writing your own poems, applying techniques you've studied and finding your unique voice. These skills extend far beyond poetry study. Close reading applies to all texts, novels, plays, essays, even new articles and advertisements. Attention to language nuance improves all communication. You'll write better emails, get better presentations, communicate more effectively. Comfort with ambiguity prepares you for complex thinking if or in any field, law, medicine, business, all involves navigating ambiguity, creating expression, enhancing problem solving, metaphorical thinking, and creative connections, driving improve innovation. The interpretive skills you've developed transfer to literature, film, art, and even everyday conversations. Now let's move to encouragement for lifelong exploration. Do not let your engagement with poetry and when this course concludes. Poetry offers lifelong enrichment available whenever you need beauty, insight, or solace. Keep a poetry box on your nightstand. Read a poem before sleep. Subscribe to a poem a day. Emails from the Academy of American Poets or poetry foundations. Attend readings in your community. Hearing poetry, their work is powerful. Continue writing, even if just for yourself. In journals, return to poems you loved and discover how they speak differently as you change and grow. A poem you read at 20 will mean something different at 40. As T.S. Eliot wrote, poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. And it is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. But of course, only those who have personality and emotions know that. Uh, know what it means to want to escape from these things, poetry towards you in proportion to what you brings to it. Now let's go to deepening understanding. Deepening understanding. The more poems you read, the richer your understanding becomes. Each poem you encounter teaches you something about how poetry works, building your intuitive understanding. The more you write, the more sophisticated your craft grows. Your first poems might feel awkward, but your 20th or 50th will shows tremendous growth. The more you discuss poetry with others, the more perspectives you uh, gain. Every conversation about poetry expands your interpretive repertoire. Make poetry a regular part of your intellectual and creative life. Not something you confine to academic requirements. Read poetry for pleasure, write poetry for expression, discuss poetry for connection. Now let's move to the pleasure of poetry beyond all theoretical skills and academic learning. Remember this, poetry is ultimately about pleasure. The pleasure of a beautiful language. Words arranged so perfectly they gave physical delight. The pleasure of recognition when a poem captures something you have felt but couldn't articulate, you think, yes, that's exactly it. The pleasure of surprise when a metaphor illuminates an idea in a new way. Hope is the thing with feathers. Suddenly, you see hope differently, the pleasure of connection to voices across time and the culture speaks to universal human experiences. Reading Sabahu from ancient Greece or Rumi from medieval Persia and feeling they speak directly to you. Let yourself enjoy poetry, read for pleasure as well as study. Trust your responses. Poetry exists not just to be analyzed, but to be experienced, savored, and lived with. Now let's go to tools for engagement. Tools for engagement. You now have the tools to engage meaningfully with one of humanity's oldest and the most beautiful art forms. Use them well, use them often, and let poetry enrich your life in ways both expected and, and surprising. The world of beauty, the world of poetry is vast and welcoming. Step into it with confidence and curiosity. Explore different traditions, different eras, different styles. Find poets who speak to you and read everything they wrote, discover contemporary poets experimenting with new forms, return to classics, and discover why they endured. Poetry is an infinite resource for beauty, meaning, and connection. Now let's go to final thoughts introduction. You've reached the end of this introductory presentation. Um, but your journey of poetry is just beginning. Everything you've learned here, from basic definitions to sophisticated analytical techniques, provides a foundation for ongoing exploration and discovery. Poetry is not a subject to be finished, but a lifelong companion offering new insights, pleasures, and challenges at every stage of life. As you move forward, remember that becoming a skilled reader and writer of poetry is a gradual process requiring patience, practice, and genuine engagement. Do not expect immediate mastery. Enjoy the journey of discovery. Now, let's go to embrace poetry as dynamic and accessible. One common misconception about poetry is that it's an exclusive, difficult art from difficult art form reserved for intellectuals or specialists. Nothing could be further from the truth. Poetry belongs to everyone, from ancient oral traditions, where illiterate people memorized and recited epic poems, to contemporary social media, where poets shark or share work on Instagram and X or Twitter. Poetry has always been democratic art accessible to all who bring curiosity and attention. You do not need special credentials or innate talent. Just willingness to engage. Anyone can read poetry. Anyone can write poetry. The barriers are artificial. But poetry is dynamic. Poetry is always dynamic. Poetry is also dynamic, constantly evolving. While you have studied traditional forms and historical movements, contemporary poets continue innovating, experimenting with new forms, subjects, and approaches. Poetry embraces technology. Poets use digital media, creating interactive poems, experiment with visual and sound elements. Poetry responds to current events. Poets address climate change, racial justice, pandemic experience, political upheaval. Poetry crosses the genre boundaries. Poets blend poetry with memoir, fiction, visual art, music. Poetry reflects our changing world. Stay curious about new development while honoring poetry's rich traditions with both classic and contemporary work. Using your new tools, you now possess a toolkit of strategies for reading, analyzing, and creating poetry. You can identify literary devices, understand how form shapes meaning, construct supporting interpretations, and express yourself through poetic language. These aren't abstract academic skills. They they are practical tools for engaging more deeply with poetry and with language generally. Every conversation, every text you read, every piece you write will be enriched by these skills. Now let's move to continue reading wildly. Here's what to do. First, continue reading wildly. Read diverse poets from different eras, cultures, and traditions. Challenge yourself with unfamiliar styles. If you have only read contemporary free verse, try formal poetry. If you know British and American poetry, explore poetry from Africa, Asia, Latin America. Return to favorites and discover new favorites. Let your reading shape your taste and expand your perspectives on what poetry can be and do. Create a personal poetry library or reading list. Keep writing. Second, keep writing. Maintain a writing practice even without assignments requiring it. Write regularly, even if just brief exercises, 10 minutes a day adds up. Experiment with forms and techniques you've learned. Try a sonnet one day, free verse the next, haiku the next, revise past work. Poems are never truly finished. You can always return and revise, share your poems, even comfortable with friends and online communities at open mic nights, but also write just for yourself. Not everything needs an audience. Engage with poetry communities. Third, engage with poetry communities. Attend readings in your community. Bookstores, libraries, universities often host readings. Join writing groups where you share and discuss work and participate in online forums dedicated to poetry. Follow contemporary poets on social media. Many poets share work and insight on Twitter, X now, Instagram, or personal websites. Poetry thrives in community, connecting with others who love poetry enhances your experience and exposes you to new voices and perspectives. You will find your people, others who can care about language, who value careful reading, who find meaning in poetry. Preparing for what's ahead. Your upcoming lessons will focus on detailed poetic analysis and creative writing builds on the foundation established here. You will examine specific poems closely, practice analytical writing, experiment with various poetic forms, and develop your creative voice. Come to these lessons prepared to engage actively, take risks, and embrace the challenges of close reading and creative expression. Expect to the confused or expect to be confused sometimes. Confusion is part of deep learning. When you're confused, you're encountering something new, something challenging. Expect to struggle with different poems. Struggle leads to breakthrough. The poems that resist easy understanding often reward sustained attention most richly. Expected to write poems that do not work. Failed experiments teach us much as successes. Every poet writes bad poems. The difference is persistence. Now let's go to the uh, um, openness and persistence. Approach upcoming work with openness, persistence, and willingness to receive your thinking and writing. Be open to new interpretations, new approaches, new styles. Be persistent. Do not give up when poems seem impenetrable. Return to them, try different approaches, discuss with others, be willing to revise your thinking. Your first interpretation might not be your final one, and that's final Intellectual growth requires changing your mind sometimes. Be willing to revise your writing. Good writing emerges through rewriting. Your journey continues. Everyone, I mean everyone, every poem you read from now on will be enriched by the knowledge and skills you've gained. You will notice things you would have missed before. You will catch metaphors, recognize symbols, hear rhythmic patterns, appreciate structural choices. You'll uh, ask better questions, not just what does this means, but how does this mean? How does this work? Why did the poet make this choice? You will make more sophisticated connections between poems, between poetry and other arts, between poetry and the life. You will experience poems more fully, intellectually, emotionally, aesthetically. Um, this doesn't mean poetry becomes less mysterious or magical. Quite the opposite. The more you understand about how poetry works, the more you appreciate its artistry and the power. Knowledge enhances wonder rather than diminishing it. Thank you, and Carl Sandberg quote. Thank you for engaging with this introduction. Approach your continued poetry study with enthusiasm, curiosity, and confidence. Trust you're developing skills while remaining open to growth. Let poetry surprise, challenge, and delight you. And above all, enjoy the journey. Poetry has been enriching human lives for millennia, and now you are part of the continuing tradition. Carl Sandburg wrote poetry is the journal of the sea animal living on land. Wanting to fly in the air, poetry is a search for syllables to shoot at the barriers of the unknown and the unknowable. Poetry reaches words what we cannot fully grasp, articulates what resists articulation, and connects us to mysterious beyond everyday understanding. Welcome to the world of poetry. Your adventure has only just begun. Read boldly, write bravely. Do not let fear of imperfection stop you from creating. Let poetry transforms how you see language, literature, and life itself. The tools are in your hands. The analytical strategies, the knowledge of forms and devices, the awareness of context, the creative techniques, the possibilities are limitless. Go forth and explore whether you become a professional poet, a teacher, a business person, a scientist, or anything else. Poetry will enrich your life. It will make you a better reader, writer, thinker, and human being. Now let's move to closing. So thank you. This concludes your introduction to poetry. Thank you for your attention, your engagement, and your willingness um, to enter the world of poetry. I hope you feel equipped and inspired to continue this journey. Remember that poetry is always here for you in moments of joy, sorrow, confusion, or clarity. It's a resource, a companion, a challenge, and a gift. Use it all.